Today we're going to look at lesson 9.6. We're still doing the quadratic formula in order to solve. So just a reminder, the quadratic formula, which will always be given to you, is x equals negative b plus or minus, under the square root, we will have b squared minus 4ac, and that's all over 2a. Here's the thing though, in our last lesson, remember, we have to have the equation look like this. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. If we do not have this equaling 0, we do not have enough information to correctly identify the a, the b, and the c. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to have to make an equation equal 0 before we can start doing the quadratic formula. Notice that in problem number 1, we have 2x squared minus 3x, but it equals 8. I need it to equal 0. So that means we need to move the 8 to the left side. To move a positive 8, we are going to subtract it. So subtracting it then brings everything over to the left. The thing is, none of those are like terms. So I don't have to try to combine anything. And I want to put that number at the very end. So we'll have 2x squared minus 3x minus 8 equals 0. Now we have everything we need to identify the a, the b, and the c. So then we can start substituting that into our quadratic formula. A is always in front of the x squared, b is always in front of the x, c is the number that's by itself. So notice that if we didn't set it equal to 0, you would have said c was 8, and you would have had the incorrect value to be plugging in. So we're going to have x equals, I want my negative sign, and then in parentheses, the b value, which is negative 3. Under the square root, we'll want in parentheses, negative 3 squared minus 4, and then I'll have our two parentheses. We'll substitute in our a value and the c value. This entire thing is all over 2 times a, and our a is 2. Okay, I'm going to start simplifying. Notice that we have back-to-back negatives. A negative times a negative makes that number on the top a positive. Negative 3 squared under the square root will be positive 9. If I look, all the numbers after, I've got two negatives. A negative times a negative is going to give me a positive. If I multiply 4 times 2 times 8, I'm going to get the number 64. This is all over 2 times 2, which is 4. So I want to start adding the numbers that are under the square root. 9 plus 64 is going to give us 73. This is all over 4. If you put this into the calculator to solve the square root, so I want to just put the square root of 73 in the calculator. Once again, if you get a decimal, then that means that you're going to leave your answer as it is. If your calculator spits out another radical, you're going to put that answer down. Notice that when you put it into the calculator, it actually keeps it as the square root of 73, or it gives you a decimal, which means there's nothing that we can do to simplify this any further. I'm going to circle that. That is my answer. Because we have that plus or minus sign, that tells me we have two answers, which is what we want because I have a squared term, which means we should have two answers. Taking a look at the next problem, because it does not say equal 0, we once again need to do a little bit of work to make it equal 0. I want to move that positive 3 over to the other side by subtracting. So when I subtract 3, it gets rid of it on the right. Nothing on the left are like terms. So we'll have 4x squared minus x minus 3, but now it equals 0. And that's what I want it to be in order to identify the a, the b, and the c values. Remember, a is in front of my x squared, B is in front of my X, and C is the number without the variable. So we carefully have a 4, a -1 for B, and a -3 for C. I'm going to substitute those in to my letters. So we'll have the negative, and then I want the B value. Plus or minus, under the square root, we will have -1 in parentheses being squared. We want to subtract, then we'll have the 4, and then we'll have two parentheses with the A, which is 4, and the C, which is -3. This is all over 2 times our A, which is 4. Notice that once again, we have back-to-back negatives, so we'll start with now a +1. Under the square root, -1 squared is 1. Notice how what comes after, I see two negatives. A negative times a negative is going to make that a positive. If I multiply 4 times 3, we'll get 48. This is all over 4 times 2, which is 8. I'm going to add those numbers that are under the radical. 1 plus 48 is 49. So put that radical into the calculator, and you'll notice we get a nice number. We get the number 7. So because we don't have a square root, that means I want to continue. I'm going to break this up into two different fractions. We will have 1 plus 7 divided by 8, and we will have 1 minus 7 being divided by 8. So if I add 1 plus 7, I get 8. 8 divided by 8 gives us 1. So that means that one of my answers for X is 1. If I do 1 minus 7, we get -6. When I divide that by 8, it's not going to divide into a nice number. It is a fraction. However, this fraction can be simplified. Both of these are even numbers. So if I divide both by 2, we'll have -3 over 4. So -3 over 4 is my second and final answer. Looking at this last example here, notice that it does not equal 0. So to make it equal 0, we got to move the 10 to the other side. I am going to subtract that 10 over to the left. None of those on the left are like terms, so we'll have 3x squared plus 4x minus 10 equals 0. That now allows me to identify the A, the B, and the C. So once again, let me write that formula for us. I want to use the quadratic formula of x equals -b plus or minus under the square root. We will have b squared minus 4ac, and that is all over 2a. So if I carefully start substituting, we'll keep the negative, then in parentheses, I put my b value. Plus or minus under the square root. We want the b value first to be squared, -4, and then we want two parentheses. One parenthesis has our a, one parenthesis has our c. This is all over 2 times a. Because there's only one negative sign with that 4, we will keep it negative. Plus or minus under the square root, 4 squared is 16. If I look at how many negative signs come after, I see 2. And don't forget, a negative times a negative is a positive. So if I multiply 4 times 3 times 10, I get 120. This is all over 2 times 3, so we have 6 in the bottom. I'm going to add those numbers that are under the radical. We have 16 plus 120, so that's going to give us 136 under that square root. Remember, do the square root only in the calculator. See if it simplifies down. Notice that if you have it in your calculator and it gives you a decimal, then feel free to circle this. We can't go any further. That is my final answer. Or if you do have a calculator that will simplify for you, you should see in the calculator 2 and then the square root of 34. So we'll want that on the top, and it's still all over 6. Either one of those answers I would accept as your final answer.